This is part 2 of a conversation with Dr. Michael Biel. Today is August 3rd, 2016. It is 2:30 p.m. My name is Rob Sammons.
And it is hot outside.
It is. All right, thank you, Dr. Biel, for joining us again for part 2. Sir, what are your opinions on the outcomes of the religious liberty and marriage equality movement?
Well, some of the problems that this pointed out are still here, and the new governor is trying to undo a lot of the advances that have been made. And part of the problem is that the country is getting more and more involved in the gay rights movement. As to whether they are getting more involved in the religious liberty part of the movement, that remains to be seen because of the current political race. A lot of the old stereotypes and the old arguments that we thought had been buried have come out again. And that has not made things comfortable for many people. And their conception of what religious liberty is quite different from what mine is. A lot of people feel, in order for they to have religious liberty, they have to be free to do anything that they want to, which can be abusive to the people that are not of like mind, of their point of view, their political or social points of view. Whereas my conception of religious liberty is that I don't bother you, you don't bother me. And that your religion has no place in any governmental authority. Which governmental authority should be completely neutral, and that has been under fire in certain political circles now, and the passage of certain, religious liberty laws seem to be quite to the contrary, as far as my looking at those laws. That the religious liberty is just for a certain group. The majority group in whatever area that happens to be, which might not necessarily really be the actual majority. So that's so not all of the the things that we were bringing up and we were fighting for have been settled. Not that we expected really that things would be settled. Because it will take time. It will take another generation probably to smooth some of the attitudes out. We still see a lot of remnants of racism that at least the Supreme Court had deemed to be a thing of the past about 3 years ago. And I think that the 5 members that expressed that point of view were probably the only 5 people in the country that felt that way.
So would you call your efforts a victory?
They were a victory in that we were able to make sure that the people that had been actually affected by what was being done against them, that they were able to, that they were able to get their marriage licenses. And in that fashion, that was, that was a victory. It was a victory for a fight that shouldn't have had to have been fought. Is really what the real situation is. So I don't consider it to really be a win-lose. What we were trying to do is make sure that people realized that the entire population was not acquiescing to what Kim Davis was promoting. That it was not, that it is not the general Rowan County attitude. Indeed, one of the things that I had mentioned earlier is that we saw so few people in the local community come to her defense. That almost all of the people that were coming to her defense were people that were brought in or came in from the outside. Almost everybody that was opposed to her, that were involved in our group, were locals, and that I think was very important. We were locals, and B, we didn't have to be coerced or encouraged to come and protest. I came of my own free will, and part of the thing was that it was something that, as I mentioned before, I was out of town, I was out of state at the time the original decision was made, and I was sort of chomping at the bit till I could get back into town and then get involved and just in a peripheral way. I never wanted to be like a ringleader, a group leader, take any elected or appointed position once the group started to become organized. Not even a position of being official photographer. I just was there and took pictures because I didn't want to be sort of beholden to have to be there. Because I would be out of town once again for a month or so at a time potentially. Plus, if it was going to be too hot out, and I don't mean politically hot, I mean temperature-wise, I wanted to be able to protect my health. So I didn't want to be the official photographer, and there were plenty of other people that started once. They weren't taking pictures before I started taking pictures, but once I started taking pictures, there were other people that were doing it as well.
Good. How has the community at large changed because of these events, if it has?
I don't know if it really has changed. Right now, it seems to have settled down to status quo. And status quo with the one additional aspect of that there are some not usual marriages amongst the population. Both male, female, as well as transgender. There has been a backlash within the groups, however, and that has developed while, again, I was out of town, and so I still don't know everything that is going on with it. But the group has splintered into two groups, and there were several people that were just very adamant in their points of view. From what I could see is they were relatively intolerant of those who were involved in this movement because of religious liberty. That they were in it for sexual freedom. And I don't think that they really understood that the sexual freedom part of the situation was really just an excuse. I noticed it the first time we went to court, the first time we went out to Covington. And the group arrived, 15 or 20 people, in support of Kim. All of their signs were based on religious liberty. There was not one single sign objecting to the any sexual orientation. Every sign they were carrying had to do with religion. And of course, this was a church-organized group. The guy who had organized it, the painter from Grayson, was an itinerant preacher, and so that was one of his one of his points of view is that it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And there was a little boy about 11 years old or so who was there with his father, and the little boy is carrying a sign that says, "It's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve." And so as they were standing in front of our group, I leaned over and I said, God created Steve too. And I think that kid is still mulling over that little piece of information even now.
How does Steve fit into the equation? Certainly.
Exactly. So, that was one of the rare instances of the sexual orientation being brought up. They were just using it as an excuse. I think the whole thing is based on a nationwide push to try to bring evangelical religion into government. Try to get political positions, down to city council, school boards, dog catcher. Get the local governments evangelical, and move upwards into state legislatures, and that was the main purpose. This was the sexual orientation situation was just a handy issue to latch onto. There probably could have been several others that they could have latched onto as well. And so I tried to explain that to them. You're being used as pawns. They're not really quite that interested in you. They are more interested in getting having a religious takeover of the government. And it's something that's been going on for 20, 30 years. Long before there was any possibility that the gay rights movement would spread, when it was still something that was a minority 20-30% agreement in the general population, and that it seemed to be something that is not going to create a groundswell of interest around the country. And so it's something that as it did increase in acceptance, they were able to latch on to it as something that they could you go into different communities and say, you got trouble, my friends. And as a matter of fact, there's a good video that someone has put out that is based on the Trouble in River City song from the Music Man.
Okay. Do you think the debate between these two ideologies is over?
No, I don't think so. I think that, again, depending upon the outcome of the election, that the Supreme Court ruling is pretty safe, and that will allow for the stability of the situation. Once people realize that the sky is not falling, Armageddon is not happening, that your heterosexual marriage is not being affected or degraded by the fact that there are alternatives, that part of it will settle down. There will always be, though, churches that will try to stir things up as far as the political movement of church into state. And so that's something I think that that will continue. I have to admit that the world has changed, the country has changed, and I think for the most part it has been for the better. But there are some people that are looking askance at what has happened in the last 5 or 10 years, the last 40 or 50 years. I would think possibly there are some people that look askance about what has happened in the last 100 years. Oh, look at all these horseless carriages that have taken over. That's to the extreme. But gosh, every time there has been some progressive movement, even as something as mundane as the development of the automobile, there have been those that have resisted it. It is changing our society. And it became something that was studied as a sociological situation, how our country has changed because of the addition of the mobility that is granted to us by the automobile. And when you think now about the enormous advances in air travel, how much there has been a change in the worldwide travel attitude. If you wanted to travel to Europe, you used to have to take a steamship that would take 6 to 10 days to get over there, and it was not inexpensive. And now it's something that people in New York can sometimes fly over to Europe for a weekend. that from some parts of the country, it is less expensive to take a European trip than it is to go to, let's say, visit the Grand Canyon or visit some, Midland city in the United States. It's cheaper to go, to go to Paris. It's cheaper to go to Vienna than it is to go to St. Louis. And from where we are in Kentucky, it's the same thing with our air travel. Here that we're in the our air travel is relatively expensive to get from one place to another within the United States, but it certainly is not as difficult as it used to be. I was told here in Morehead when I arrived back in the late 70s. They were still telling the stories about Adrian Dorn, who had just retired the semester before I arrived. And he would say to the students, if you don't like it here, there's a bus going east and a bus going west. And of course, there are no buses going east or west here, and we don't have the railroads going through Morehead anymore. But we've got the interstate, and all the kids have cars, or enough of them have cars. And it is easy, relatively easy, for them to go home for the weekend, even if they're not directly on the interstate. They live down in some of the mountain towns. They can go home for the weekend, whereas prior to the mid-70s, they arrive in August for the beginning of their semester, and they are here on campus until the Christmas break. They might not even be able to get home for Thanksgiving. Because, well, if they go home for Thanksgiving, well, we're just going to be going home for the winter break in another 3 weeks anyway. And so, why bother? So it's a completely different lifestyle for them as well. And how often would you get into Lexington? If there's a bus going east and a bus going west, but there are only 3 of them a day. And if you wanted to take a day trip to Lexington, you would have to make sure you would up early enough to get the first morning bus, and you would have to make sure that you got finished with what you were doing by somewhere around 4 o'clock, I think, to get the bus. I looked at the schedule one time, to get the bus coming back into Morehead, or you're going to get stuck in Lexington and you're not going to be able to get back in time for your classes. So that whole aspect of life has changed, and I'm again from the New York City area. Was born in Manhattan, but I grew up in New Jersey. And I found it very interesting. When I was in high school, I remember reading about a group of Fresh Air Fund kids that would be, New York City, inner city kids that were given a week's vacation. And 90% of them had never been out of New York City. Many of them, if they were from Manhattan, had never gone out of Manhattan. They'd never have gone to any of the other boroughs. And I remember also that there was an exchange group of like about a dozen kids from my town with a dozen kids from New York, and they had never been in New Jersey. I'm thinking, like, all you have to do to get to New Jersey is hop a bus and go across the George Washington Bridge. Then I realized wait a second, after they get to New Jersey, why? What would they have? What would they do? Okay, get across the George Washington Bridge, you're in Fort Lee, in Englewood. There's nothing in Fort Lee. There's nothing in Englewood. There's nothing in Teaneck. You go further, Hackensack. Now, by the time you get to Paramus, there are some shopping centers and department stores. But they got shopping centers and department stores in New York City. And most of the big department stores, I'm talking about the 1960s, let's say, that were in the shopping centers, were branches of the New York City department stores. There'd be no reason. Once they got off the bus, let's say they picked a bus, a stop on Route 4, which was the highway I lived a block and a half from. And they get off the bus. They're just there amongst houses. There's nothing to go to. There would be no reason for them to go to New Jersey or to Connecticut or to Brooklyn. Anything that they wanted in Manhattan, could be in Manhattan. And during that period of time, the kids that lived in Brooklyn, most of what they would need, you want to go to a quote-unquote mall, shopping area, let's say. All the big department stores had Brooklyn stores. There were movie theaters all over the place. I couldn't believe going through the Brooklyn Eagle how many movie theaters there were in Brooklyn. There were like 3 or 4 movie theaters there now. I take a look in the streets near my daughter's house, and I see 4 store buildings that are former movie theaters. There's only 1 movie theater in that whole area of Brooklyn where she lives, and it's like about 15 blocks away. And the easiest way to get there would be to get on the subway. And 3 stops down would be where that movie theater would be. But you'd be paying the same $2.25 to get to that theater and another $2.25 to get back as you would to go into Manhattan, where there are dozens of movie theaters. And so it's it is different there, even there, a little bit more mobility. But it still is, because I compare that with what we heard when we were growing up. There are some people in Kentucky that have never been outside the county that they live in, or they've never been outside of Kentucky, or they go to the big city of Cincinnati. And people in New York, it's the same difference. It's the same difference. Because nobody in in general in New York, as far as percentages, has a car.
Yeah.
So it's more likely when I lived in New Jersey for me to go into New York than it would be for people going that lived in New York to come into New Jersey. But when I consider myself sort of like a world traveler now, but I never was in Europe until I was teaching here at Morehead, and we had exchange classes in London. And so my first trip overseas was in 1983 when I was in my late 30s. So it's something that's why I always have encouraged the students to, when these European trips were made available to them, do it, take it. It is an experience that really is important. I wish that I had had it when I was a kid. Now, of course, my daughter practically grew up in Europe. We brought her back there when she was 5 years old, and so As I say, she went to Europe last week with her mother, just to go to London for a week. And she and I are hoping to get back to Europe sometime this fall. Usually we go in the spring, around April. We've been gone the last 3 years, around the time of her birthday. But we weren't able to this year, and so we hope we'll be able to squeeze in a week or 2 weeks this fall to go to Europe. But it's so it's a you hear some people say the United States is the best country in the world. Have you ever been to any other? Or we hear the stories about the New World Order and internationalism. And I think the country is becoming more political isolationist, much like the 1930s. To the point that there's an America First movement which uses the same name as Charles Lindbergh's America First movement in the late 1930s. So it's something that I guess it's these cycles that that are happening. So it's so I have to realize that it's not necessarily that not necessarily everybody believes the way I do, the way our group do, and I'm by no means the most radical member of the people that were involved in the protests, and I consider myself, as far as the group is concerned, to be fairly quiet and laid back and just observing what was happening.
How do you plan to continue this fight for equality?
Well, right now the two factions are planning a Pride Day. I'm trying to think of what they're calling it, a Pride Day at the end of the month, and I'll go there, but I'm not getting involved in any of the planning or any of the activities. Partially because I don't know who is who is on which side, who is on that side. But it's something that I think is important. One of the problems that developed in the schism between the two groups is the student activity group got caught up in the middle of it. And during last summer, all of this was happening in June and July to the beginning of August. And then finally, in the middle of August, the students started returning. I kept on saying, let's see what happens when the students come back. Let's try to immediately get the students involved. Now, I did not realize that there was a gay, lesbian group on campus, and that there had been for many years. I don't think that they were there when I was there. And so the first week of classes, or the week of registration, 4 or 5 of the members of the group were there with us. And this was during the time when the licenses were starting to be issued. And so the two groups were lined up on either side of the sidewalk that led right into the building, rather than one group being by the sidewalk on Main Street and the other group being on the lawn, the second lawn in front of the, but nearer the parking lot. So now the two groups were closer together. So now some of the college kids were there. And I thought that was great. And I kept on saying, what you need to do is plaster signs all over campus saying, come down and join us at 10 o'clock or later. We'll be here in front of the courthouse. And they didn't really do that. They said, well, we'll let the student group do that. And so in a sense, the only people that really showed up were people that were members of the student group. I wanted the general population at large of the students to get involved. Not just the people to whom this is a personal issue. I wanted it to be something that the entire campus would be aware of. There has been less communication with the student newspaper being almost dormant. And I'm not sure what kind of TV newscast is being done now, because the radio TV department that I was a part of has been completely dismembered to a certain extent, and I don't really know what kind of journalism, video journalism is being taught or is being practiced as an extracurricular activity. It never was that big a deal on our campus. As far as the radio station is concerned, that's almost a lost cause, partially because the news director is very conservative. And so nothing gets really covered on the radio station. If this was a radio station that I was managing myself, we would have students doing programs and doing interviews all the time. They would be doing live coverage from all of the big events that had occurred. We would have brought them out with microwave interlink out to the courthouses in Covington and Newport, and it would have we would have been doing live coverage, but that's not a idea that the current management of the radio station would want to do. Also because it's not part of the academic side of the fence anymore. The radio station is part of development. So the radio, it was moved over to development like about 20 years ago over our vehement objections. But it's part of the administration now. And so that's something that we cannot expect that the radio station would be involved in something that was not totally backed by the administration of the university, and something that would create potential for unrest, potential for bad news, bad reputation. That's not going to be touched. That's not going to be covered by the radio station. And in a lot of colleges, the newspapers also have to keep looking over their shoulder if they want to cover something. So it's something that is up to the students now to get involved and to do something. And so I was hoping that there would be more involvement in the general student population. I'm sure that 3/4, if not more, of the MSU students last fall knew nothing about what had been happening here all summer. How many college students in general read newspapers, watch TV news. And it's, and it's a shame that they probably did not really understand what was happening. If they heard anything, it was from their elders, and so they get the point of view of a different group of people than the people that would have than their own students. Media coverage. Well, we only got to just just touch on it a little bit last time. Media coverage was something that, being a media person myself, I was always looking for. I wanted to make sure when there was information spread around to us, hey, we think there are going to be some reporters down here, so I wanted to make sure that there would be people there, and that's one of the reasons why at least Mary Hargis, who had a good track record of attendance, was going to be able to be there, and that we wouldn't, that a reporter wouldn't show up and just see that there was those backing her. Wanted to make sure that our oppositions were available to A, be photographed, and B, be interviewed. So I always have felt over the years that whenever anybody gets involved in something, they never are satisfied with the news coverage that they get. And part of it is they've been there all day. They've invested 4, 5, 10 hours that day in this situation. And they get home at 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock or so. They turn on the news and they see that their entire day is being discussed in 45 seconds. So they're 45 seconds. It should have been half the newscast. And so nobody would ever be happy with whatever coverage you would find, especially once the newscast goes off into light fluff pieces. And most newscasts only have maybe 5 to 7 minutes total of news that's important. Everything else is chit chat, weather, sports, which should be separate pieces, and public, human interest stories, which have no date value at all, and could be aired at any time. Could be aired next month and would have the same the same interest as it does airing it today. Back in the early days of television, you would have a 15 or 20 minute newscast. The newscast would end, commercial break, up would come the sportscast. 5 minutes. There would be an opening for the program. There would be a closing for the program. Commercial break. Come on now at 27 after, and there's the weather forecast. And it would have an opening. It would do the weather. They would do a closing, and then would get on. The sports and the weather was never part of the news. Sports should never be part of a newscast because sports is, by its very nature, biased. And I would not be comfortable as a newscaster, as a journalist, to be involved in the same broadcast, sitting at the same desk as somebody who is hired to be biased in favor of their particular teams. It's not what journalism is supposed to be. So it's something that I would have hoped that we would have gotten more broadcast, broadcast information put out there. If nothing more than there's 10 to 20 second piece every day where they might say there still is demonstrations continuing now in Rowan County and Morehead on this continuing situation, and nothing outwardly happened, but to just remind people of the different things that are happening in their community. And broadcast news doesn't do that anymore. It's something that even if you go on the internet to, you see a story, and about something that happened to somebody, or that there was a police action that you disagree with, or there is a demonstration or something, and you see the story and you never see any follow-ups. I have looked at stuff where it happened, so somebody posts it as if it's a current story, and I take a look at the date, it's 6 months ago. So I said, this is 6 months ago, or sometimes it's 4 years ago. What has happened since then? Well, they don't know. Okay, so I go and take a look, see if I can find out. And I can't find out. They never update the stories. You never find out if someone was found guilty or not. If somebody had been in an accident, what their physical condition was. They never follow, basically maybe only 20% of the time or less do they really follow through on these things. A big story at the beginning, and then nothing thereafter.
I've noticed that myself. How has this experience changed you, if it has?
Well, I got to meet a lot of people that I would not have otherwise met. Not that I continued to be close to them. I've seen Mary a couple of times in the last 3 or 4 weeks 3 weeks or so since I've been back in town, and to have a chance to wave to her and say hi. How are things how are things going? And there is one woman who had been who my daughter had known when she was in high school. It wasn't one of her teachers, but it was her academic team coach. And so I've been able to now meet her and become acquainted with her, both in person and on Facebook, that I had never, I'd never known of her. I had known of her, but I'd never really met her back at the time when my daughter was on the team. And so that's about all that that has happened. There have been a few people that I've met that, not that I'm sorry that I've met, but that I have no real feeling of wanting to maintain a close friendship with them. I was able to get reacquainted with the daughter of one of my late colleagues, and because I plugged her name in and found out that she was really interested in this, and and she has come down to many of the even though she lives 30, 40 miles away, that she has come down to many of the demonstrations. So I've gotten to be able to tell our story around the world because I have friends both friends that I know and friends that I've met on Facebook. And there are some people that that I've met and known from my recording interests, and they have seen my postings, my political postings, and as well as these postings about this situation, and I find that they're right in step with me. I had no idea. I would not have had any idea about that. And so, one guy in particular I knew of only as somebody involved in tape remastering, and find that he is very much in tune with all of my political points of view. And there are several people involved in the film restoration areas who are really involved in politics that I did not know about. And so that has brought me closer to together with them. And I mentioned my friend in Iceland who he and his family are very interested in the political situation in Iceland, as well as, of course, the political situation here in the United States, and who are following very closely what is happening in our presidential campaign. And so it's so a lot of things that I post is partially to update the friends overseas. And so I've got people who are interested in this, who are in Great Britain, Germany, Sweden, Finland, Ukraine,
That's great.
South Africa.
Whoa.
So Facebook has helped. Has helped a lot in bringing us together, and they've there are a couple of people who have been not enamored of what I post, including my sister.
All right.
But and I think it's partially her husband is more of is 180 degrees away from from me politically, and my poor sister is just standing back, making sure to keep peace in the family.
Sure.
And but and I know that she's not as turned away from my points of view as she has to sort of put a facade on. So that's one of the we haven't had any family feuds, so to speak. One of my cousins one of my cousins and her daughter, so my niece, are just love my postings. And so it's so that part of the family is really involved in what I write and what I put up. But so that has been that's been important to me. It's made my life more interesting,
Sure.
I think.
And you're learning facets of these folks that you might not have known before.
Yeah. Well, it's been something that I've not really been involved in politics well, may have been involved in politics, but with political points of view, but not involved in the social aspects, and so that has been a big change, big boost.
All right. Well, we're getting close to the end. My last question is there any comment or thought that I have neglected to ask that you would like to cover?
No, I think I've made enough tangents, I think, to get in, some of the ideas that were not basic, not basic answers to the, to the questions. I probably, after I look at this, think, oh, I should have said that. And, so maybe I'll do an addendum to you.
Sure, that'd be great.
And things like that. And I hope that I didn't upset some, I hope it doesn't upset some people. I was kind of frank with some of my thoughts about several people, and that they might, I would hope that maybe this might have opened their eyes to the way they are viewed by other people. And my only statement is, you brought it upon yourself. It didn't, 135 of the 137, is it, counties just went along their merry way, no problems, no difficulties. It was only these two counties that did, and it was mainly just this county that got involved with it, and that's something that didn't have to happen. Didn't have to happen.
Well, you're right. It didn't have to happen, and I hope we see more from this subject in the next couple years to come.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us for this conversation, and that draws us to an end.
Okay.